We are finally here in the last video of this series. We are going to get the handles that we made in the previous video and we're going to attach it to the cup to make a mug. So if that's something that you folks want to see, stick around, find out how we do it. Alright, so I got my station ready to start attaching whichever handle I want to my mug. And here are the tools that I like using whenever I do attachments for my pieces. So I have slip, which you can see is incredibly thick. You don't necessarily need slip. You can use water, or you could use a thin down version from your throw water. Like this. At the bottom is some thicker slip. But anyway, the slip, a needle for scratching and scoring, a brush to apply the slip and smooth things out, a cutting tool or X-Acto knife to cut your handle to size, a container of water for cleanup, and then just some sponges for also cleaning up. And the first thing that we're going to do, we're actually going to put these on the side, is we are going to size the handle up to our piece. And so now's the fun part. You get to play with the handles that you've made, size it up to make it fit the piece to the size of your liking. And so we're going to kind of demo the original sizing with the slab handle that we made first. And actually, let's just do a quick overview of the handles because we haven't really done that in a while, or at least it doesn't feel like it because this was filmed over a few days. So we have our slab handle, and it's looking pretty good, but still kind of basic looking in my opinion. And then we have a nice in-between, so that was the easiest one, a slab handle. Then we have the nice in-between. We have the carrot technique. Has a little more of a handmade feel, has some taper, has some roundness. And then we have the two handles that was made the traditional way, the pulling of the handle. And you can see there's two different styles, and there's a lot more you can make, of course. But they're more or less in the same shape, just different finishes. One's fully round, the other one has some taper and some flatness to it. So, regardless on how you made your handles, sizing it up is all the same. And so we're just going to put these on the side. And before you size it up, the one thing you want to make sure, well, you can size it up before, but I like getting my handles a little drier so that it actually holds its shape. And so dry enough where if you were to hold it from the widest point or the furthest point out, it doesn't slump. But wet enough where you can actually still bend it and manipulate it. Now this is a little on the drier side where I can't really bend it too much without it cracking. So if you do want to adjust the shape, then you want to make sure you do that when it's more wet. Anyway, for sizing, basically the way I do it, and using the overhead cam is the best for this, is you put your piece on a flat surface, you stand up. I'm going to get this camera so I can see it better. You stand up so that you can then close one eye, so looking straight down, and you take your mug and you just slide it from the widest point of your piece, and then you start moving it more and more inward like that to see how the size looks. Now, when you do that, it's a lot easier to visualize how the handle will look on the piece, or if you want to stand it up, so like if you're using this camera as my eye, you put the handle behind your piece, put the mug in front, and you just kind of move it like that until you get the sizing. Now you can tell that this is just way too big, and so I'm going to be kind of making this a little rounder, and I can start adjusting the overall shape by kind of cutting this off. So I like this size here. The bottom is a little too long, so I'm going to be cutting that off. But size-wise, if I were to go like here, you can kind of see that looks pretty good. So I'm going to kind of bend this down a little bit because I do like that shape. Lengthwise, I got to make sure it's not too much taller than the piece, and I can go ahead and start cutting off this bottom section here. And so I'm going to line it up with here, and this is where straight edge comes into play if your wall is straight. You kind of line it up, and then you use that as a reference to then cut down here. Or you can just eyeball it. I will need to recut this edge because you kind of see it's kind of crooked. So I'm going to recut this edge just a tad bit. Ooh, and I definitely messed up this edge, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. There you go, that looks better. All right. So now, size-wise, this looks a little more proportional to the actual mug. And so you can actually start seeing how it looks by bending it and seeing how it looks on top. So you got to see where it falls nicely. And whenever I do handles, I like to have the top of my handle below the rim so that I can easily flip it upside down in my cabinet without the rim hitting. So once again, this is still too tall unless I put this handle on the bottom section. And so this is where you just have to play around with the shape, bend it, cut it, curve it, however you want. This needs to be a little more taller, I think, and this needs to be a little more swooped down. So it is still wet enough where I can really adjust the shape. And then you just keep playing until you get the size that you want. All right. Now the other option you have is if you are unsure how much to cut off, you can just go from the outermost edge and then just cut off little increments at a time. In this case, it's like 1/8 of an inch, or I want to say I want 2 millimeters. So you cut off a little bit from the top, a little bit from the bottom, until your handle looks like it fits and it's proportional to how you want it to be. So right there, I think that looks pretty good. Size-wise, I can fit 2, 3 fingers, possibly a 4th, and I'm making sure that my handle stays within the texture section. So that's basically getting the size and shape. And so, if this was the case, I'll get ready and get this attached. Now, I want to use a different handle, so that was my demo piece. This is going to be the one that I'm going to be using, and this was the carrot technique. I decided to use this over the other ones because, honestly, I attached one earlier and it didn't turn out how I liked, so now I have a second chance with a second piece. And so, now that I'm cutting this, I'm going to use that same method that I did before, where I'm just going to take a knife, and I got the shape roughly how I want it. I just got to get it sized to this, because right now this is a little too big for my liking. So I want to trim it down. And because this is so bulky here, I'm going to trim starting from this edge, and I'm going to remove about 1/8 of an inch at a time. So remove a little bits at a time, and then I can kind of re-bend this to make it a little more curved down. And that's going to change the way it falls onto the clay. So after I bend it, I do like that curve a little more. So then I'm going to have to adjust this angle so that it's straight. Has a nice straight edge so it can attach straight to here. And so that, I think, looks pretty good. And the first one I made, it just looks kind of weird because proportionally it's too small and I didn't use the full length. I wanted to try not to go beyond the bottom here to have it clean, but the amount of curve the handle has is a little too much in comparison to how close the two bits are. So I'm going to go ahead and use this as my new final version. So you kind of see the difference proportionally, how just slight adjustments really make the difference in how the handle falls. And so this looks much better. Now this cut I made is a little off, so I'm going to actually use a scraper here to really get this kind of fine-tuned. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this a little more, and this cuts really nicely. And kind of just looking at the overall shape, even this bottom section is a little off. So you can kind of see right here, I shouldn't have that, so I'm going to trim that off. A little trimmed a little too much, but I can kind of pinch and manipulate. And then this little flap here, it's a little too much here. So let's go to trimming that away. And let's trim this corner away. So you really don't need to do this. You can end up blending it, but I do like the finish there a little more. And now, because the length, it actually fits a little better. Proportionally, this just looks a little more, I think, mug-esque. Sizing wise and height wise, I want to make sure that the rim is higher than the top of the handle, and this is going to attach to the bottom nicely. So size wise, I think this just looks a little more proportional and cohesive than this, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. Anyway, let's get this prepared to get attached. And so the first thing that I want to do is right here. I don't want this flat. I want it to have a slight concave because my clay wall is bent. So I'm going to kind of use my finger and roll it to kind of get this curved a little bit, or you can tap. Any round tool helps for that. And the same thing, kind of just indent the center a little bit. Okay. And then once that's good, I like using a sponge to place my piece on. I'm going to kind of figure out where I want this to go. So I'm going to rotate the mug, find the part that looks the best. So I like here. So I'm going to lay that down. And I'm going to get my handle, roughly put it exactly where I want it. It's still slightly angled, it's curved, so I need to actually adjust that. So I need to trim this down to make it more straight. So from the top down, I can see that this has too much bulk to it, so I'm going to kind of cut that off. Then see how that fits. Okay, that's fitting a lot more straight. And that's going on pretty straight. So right there, that looks pretty good to me. I'm closing one eye, looking at how it lines up, top over bottom, making sure that it looks straight. And the camera looks like it's coming straight out. Flipping it around to the bottom. Looks pretty good. And then looking at it from the side, height-wise, I can bring this down just a tad bit, so I don't want it too close to the top. So bring this down a little bit, so there's a little more gap between the two. Bring this up a little bit, so there's more gap on the bottom. And spacing-wise, I do like that. So now I just have to make sure everything is straight again and aligned. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my needle tool and start tracing around the outline, so I know exactly where to scratch and score. If you are enjoying these ceramic videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps to grow the channel, and you'll be able to see these videos as they're released every week. Okay, then from here, I have my marks where I need to scratch and score. So let's go ahead and get that all roughed up. And it's okay if you can scratch and score more than the designated shape, because we are going to be blending and smoothing this area out anyway. Okay, so we're going to stand that up, and we're going to repeat the same thing on here. And we've got our slip. Let's get it attached. So I got some on my finger. I'm just going to glob it on. Sorry, I was off camera. So glob it on, kind of tap it into place. It's a really thick slip, so the shrinkage hopefully is less because the water content is not as high, but it's just kind of bulky. Okay, and then I got my handle. Let's get it positioned and attached on the top, wiggling it side to side. You can see me twisting it to really get that connection going. And then my inside hand, my right hand, is just there to basically prevent the inside from caving in on itself. So I'm going to get this top really snug and attached. You can see the slip oozing out over there. That's perfect. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Kind of get that bent into position. And before I really jam that in there, I want to make sure everything's lined up and adjusted before I really push that in. Okay, so my handle is still somewhat soft. You can see that I can move it and bend it without it cracking. So as you make mugs, you'll get used to how soft the clay needs to be. The downside is if the two pieces of clay are too drastically different than one another, you may see cracking occur where they are attached. Okay, so it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to compress it with a needle before I smooth it out. And so I'm going to take the needle and then do this inside groove first. And from the overhead cam, you can kind of see this slip. I'm just going to kind of drag the needle across that area to really compress the clay together. I want to try to do it where I don't need to attach any clay or add any more clay. So I'm going to compress the top seam, and then over here, same thing, compress this top seam. And compress the side seams. The top seam for both the top and bottom of the handle usually are where it tends to crack. Okay, so then from there, I got my container of water. We'll get a brush and to start smoothing and blending the rest. All right, so we got our brush with a little bit of water, and I'm going to start applying water on those seams first to really get those two parts connected and blended, so hopefully it prevents it from cracking. And then the sides. And then these sides, if you want, you can either leave it like that, or you can see that, let's get into focus. You can see that slight height difference between the two, or you can blend it. I prefer blending it, so I'm just going to use the side of my brush and kind of push it down. So I tend to blend the sides and the bottom of the handle. And then where they got connected, I usually leave it like that, so I have a slight gap. Okay, and then after I do some compressions and blending, I go back with the brush and I smooth it out. And then just ensuring that I don't apply too much water, because too much water can cause some cracking issues as well. All right, now let's repeat that on the top. So do the seam first. And the sides. And the other side. And then the bottom. And so the bottom is big enough where I can use my finger to kind of help push the clay down to blend. And then the sides, I'm going to use the rolling of the side of the handle of the brush. And then finish brushing and smoothing. So like I said, all of this is optional. You don't need to do all of this if you don't want to. It does take more time, so it's really up to you on how much of this finishing you want to do. All right, and then lastly, I got my finishing sponge. I'm going to use this just to kind of clean up spots and to kind of do some final smoothing around where everything meets, just to kind of tie it all together. So wherever I see or it feels like it looks weird, do some final smoothing. Okay, and then this has a weird little bump here, so I can remove that and adjust it later. But anyway, this is the mug. We got the handle attached. It looked like it dropped a little bit. So we can kind of push it a little more upwards. There we go, that's looking a little better. And so just make sure you do all of this. It's probably best to do this before you do all the blending. And I totally spaced and I just got in the blending zone, but do this before you blend it all, and excess pushing like that can also cause cracking issues, so just be mindful, be gentle, and of course, take your time. All right, there we go. So let's clear this area and get this video wrapped up. All right, I got 2 mugs made. This is the one that I just demoed on. This is the one that I made before, but I wasn't really a big fan of how it looked. So this is pretty much it. Now, before I get it turned in, handles can crack away from the body, and that's very common as you are making your first mugs. And so what we want to do is reduce the chances of it happening. Now, the reason why it does crack is because of shrinkage. You have to remember that clay shrinks. And so if one part of the piece is drier than the other, then the shrinkage has already happened in the drier part. So in this case, my mug was drier than the handle. So as this shrinks, it's going to shrink more than the mug, because the mug has already shrank, causing it to then crack away from the piece. So to prevent it from cracking, that's why it's really important that both pieces are roughly the same dryness. Now, sometimes it's really hard to do that, because usually, of course, the mug is usually drier because you have to trim it. So there are a few steps to take to hopefully prevent that from happening. So the number one thing that I recommend is taking your piece, flipping it upside down, and letting it dry slowly on a wooden board covered in a bag. You take the bag and then fully cover it with the bag and let it dry out in here for a few days. And that helps the clays kind of equalize. You get so that the odds of it cracking are a little less. So if you want to take it a step further, you can also put wax around the connection points because that will seal it from the air and it will help prevent that from drying out faster than the other areas. So especially if you use a lot of slip or a lot of water, that water content will evaporate, causing the clay to shrink more in that area. And so I do a combination of both. I get some wax and I brush it around the connection points. And so I got my purple wax. You can see that it's settled pretty hard on the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and mix that up. And then the wax will burn off in the kiln, so you don't need to worry too much about getting this where you don't want it. One recommendation though, if you have a nice board, put that on the side, lay your table or surface with newspaper, so if you don't get it on there, you can easily throw that away. But anyway, I got the wax and I'm just brushing it around the connection points. So wherever I scratch and scored, that's where I'm going to brush the wax. And you can put a light layer where you got the connections, and it's okay if this gets other places on your piece because it's wax. It'll burn off in the kiln, so you don't need to worry too much about it. Okay, so I put it on there. It's a little thick on the bottom here, so I'm just going to kind of remove that excess. I don't want too much there, so kind of removing the real thicker layering. Okay, so now that's good. Get this one on the side. And then you can see that the wax is already dried. Hopefully it gets into focus. You can see that little bit of haziness around the handle. So this is a good test. I'm actually going to leave both out in the open to see if they crack or not. This is a good test. So next week's video, hopefully one of these cracks, and hopefully I can fix it. So if that's something that you folks want to see, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see that video when it's released. And I want to say a thank you to all the Mud Club members. And if you haven't checked so far, check the community post that's for members only. I have the Google link to the document that has all the videos in a nice organized manner. So check that out. And if you folks want to become a Mud Club member, don't forget to look at the description. It has all of the perks that you receive as becoming one. And other than that, I hope you folks enjoyed the video. I hope these cracks so I can fix it. But until then, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.